The rule in DC I felt always was, if you don't want to see it above the fold on the front page of the Washington Post, then don't do it.
Welcome to another episode of Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop, co-founder of Social Driver. Let's face it, Washington is the center of influence in the US and arguably in the world. Chief Influencer features leaders who have figured out how to break through in today's fragmented and fast-changing environment. Social Driver teamed up with the Communications Board and the George Washington University College of Professional Studies to recognize these incredible leaders as chief influencers and highlight how they inspire and influence others. It's an honor to be here as the host of Chief Influencer. Chief Influencer is a partnership between Social Driver and the College of Professional Studies. And I want to thank Dean Liesel Riddle of the College of Professional Studies and the whole team for making this possible. We have you heard many of the staff here. I also want to shout out Joe and Drew, who make the AV part of this work. Thank you so much. On the Chief Influencer podcast, we showcase leaders who use the power of their personal influence to advance a mission greater than themselves. And we've had over 140 different chief influencers, from the founder of Craigslist, Craig Newmark, to the Swiss ambassador, Jacques Pilou, to U.S. Senator Andy Kim, who actually graduated from the Elliott School in this building. And I encourage you, if you're new to Chief Influencer, to subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. Check out the episode featuring Congresswoman Mukasel Powell, because we heard her talk about bipartisanship, authenticity, and much more in that fantastic episode. And this panel today is going to be a special episode of Chief Influencer, so you can re-listen to it, you can share it with your friends. And we know it's a really important conversation. It's aligned with our mission because ethical leadership and influence are deeply connected. Ethics is not just about rules or compliance, but it's about how leaders use their voice, how they build trust, exercise power, and make decisions when the stakes are high and the environment is polarized. So we're fortunate to have an outstanding panel with us today. We have the Honorable Michael Capuano, former congressman from Massachusetts. We have the Honorable Mimi Walters, former congresswoman from California, both of whom served on the Ethics Committee. We have Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Brody Mullins, who wrote the really hot book in DC. If you haven't read it, you need to, The Wolves of K Street. And we are equally fortunate to have this conversation moderated by my friend and someone who really inspires me, Nneka Chiazor. Nneka is president and CEO of the Public Affairs Council. She's one of the most thoughtful voices in communications and public affairs today. She understands that influence is most powerful when it's grounded in trust, responsibility, and service. So with that, Nneka, thank you for leading this conversation, and I'm delighted to turn it over to you. Please help me welcome Nneka and the panel.
Headline, Tuesday's headline from The Hill: Swalwell to resign amid sexual assault allegations. Just sharing in case no one has followed the news in the past 48 hours. This story was broken by an influencer who was not Brody Mullins, right? But someone in the media space. And so, Brody, I wanted to start with you, because you, through the Wolves of K Street and several other publications, have exposed ethical mishaps. Some would call them failures in business and politics. And today we're here to talk about power and accountability, influence and responsibility, and ethics. And so tell me, articles like this, exposés that you have done, has that helped improve ethical behavior, or has that harmed ethical behavior? Where do you sit?
You know, that's a good question. I feel like for our book, we went back and looked at a lot of the history of growth of the government and corporate power. And through our history, there's sort of a series of ethical reforms and times when Congress has come in to try to fix things and fix problems and root out problems. And there's always sort of an unintended consequence. I mean, it's sort of like water always finds the lowest level, scandal always finds the lowest level. The first major upgrade of our ethical rules in Washington in my lifetime was Watergate in 1974, after Richard Nixon's scandal, of course. And that created all sorts of great new laws and new requirements for disclosure and open government in Washington, but also created some problems. And every step along the way, every time there's an ethics reform, there's sort of a backlash. Another good example is when Barack Obama took office. One of the characters in our book Tony Podesta was from Chicago also and was talking about how close he was with Obama, and Obama was talking about draining the swamp. And Podesta was quoted in the New York Times saying, remember, Obama said he's going to drain the swamp, and lobbyists couldn't work in his administration, and lobbyists couldn't do this, and lobbyists couldn't do that. And Tony Podesta was quoted in the New York Times saying, if Obama banned lobbyists from driving, we'd all just get cars with drivers. And that's really sort of how things work in Washington. There's always sort of a way around whatever restrictions there are. However, I do feel like there's a lot more disclosure now than ever before. I mean, I think a lot of people outside of D.C. Really feel like all the scandals in D.C. are hidden and all the secrets are hidden. And they take that again from the Watergate era where in order to break the Watergate scandal, people literally had to find the deep throat source. Now, I feel like a lot of scandal, like Eric Swalwell, is sort of hiding in plain sight. I mean, anyone who worked in or around Capitol Hill kind of heard the Swalwell rumors, and no one really looked into it. And this happens time and time again where a scandal will sort of follow someone quietly, and had Swalwell, like Paul Manafort, never sort of stepped into a bigger role, no one ever would have reported on this. Had Swalwell not run for governor, in fact, not been expected to win, or once he got momentum, that's when the stories came out. Just like Paul Manafort. Paul Manafort's scandal was there, and no one cared about it because he didn't matter. Then he says, hey, I'm going to run Trump's campaign. Well, now he matters, and people come after him. So I feel like there's so much scandal now that's hiding in plain sight because of the increased disclosure we have out there.
But it's interesting that you say scandal, right? Which kind of connotes this is a story. However, this is ethics. And so I want to pivot now to Congressman Capuano about ethics. Because oftentimes when we say ethics, people think of it as an academic comment or exercise, something that you only discuss in fine institutions like this. But for someone like yourself, Congressman Capuano, what does ethics mean to you? Is it scandals? Is it scandal avoidance? Like, how did you come at it during your time in Congress?
Basically, when sat with myself, it was whether my mother would be unhappy with me. Kind of simple. If my mother wouldn't have liked it, if my wife would have to be embarrassed and explain whatever it is I did to somebody else, that's a problem. Now, don't get me wrong. In politics, actually, I think in life, I want to be real clear. I don't think that politics is much different than life, except it's public. And you have to kind of be on the edge all the time if you want to succeed. I think everybody who succeeds is on the edge of whatever it is they're doing, which means politics attracts a lot of type A personalities that live right out there. So for me, that's how it started. And afterwards, for me, at least in the House, it was if a member did something that I couldn't explain at home. And for me, actually, I guess the watershed moment for me was the Mark Foley scandal. When Mark Foley was accused of abusing young interns, I had to go home to people and say, I can't even tell you whether there's an investigation going on. I like to believe there is one, but I can't be sure because ethics committee wouldn't talk about it. And this is wrong. I mean, at least you can say now, good, bad, or indifferent, there is a process and the process is taking place. A lot of people complain the process is too slow. That's a fair complaint, but there is something, that something's happening. And so that's really just for me. I mean, and again, I fully understand, I believe that ethics changes. The ethics of yesterday are not the same as the ethics of today. I don't know what's true or not true about John Kennedy, what he did and didn't do, but I know that if any of those rumors were true, that in today's world, he'd be held to account. I'd like to think he'd be held to account. So ethics do change. The whole Me Too movement, it changed the world. I think for the better, but it did change the world. And again, it'll be different in 10 years than it is now. So I think it keeps moving. I think people have to wake up every day and say, okay, where are the lines today? And how do we enforce them? How do we get together? And just my ethics may not be the same ethics you have. I may believe in certain things and you may say, Mike, I don't think that's an ethical problem. Or I think whatever. So that's the other part that people don't understand. Ethics is not something that's written on a tablet by God. It is something that we impose on each other to say, here are the lines, don't cross them.
Who is responsible then for writing this? You said it's not a tablet, it didn't come from Moses. So how do we as a society, who decides then what is ethics? Like in your situation, Congressman Capuano, full disclosure, folks, his wife of 51 years is in the audience. Raise your hand, Barbara. No, seriously, we need to give a shout out to her because 51 years is not 51 days. And you do have an accountability partner, right? You did come up, like you said, at a time when you thought about your mom. But in this modern day where both parents are working, people are doing 2, 3 jobs at times. Folks are not necessarily going to a church or a synagogue or any place where you'd hear about the 10 Commandments. Who then is responsible for this thing called ethics and explaining it to society? Is it journalists like Brody? Is it folks like Congressman Mimi Walters? Who is it yourself? Who do you think? Where does that start?
It's all of us. I mean, it's a societal thing. We have to get together. And again, I may have a different line than you have. And at some point, if Mimi does something wrong and I think it's wrong and you think it's perfectly fine, there has to be discussion. And at some point along the line, somebody does something that pretty much the majority of usually a huge majority of people in this society, members of Congress, the media, will say, that's not good. And we have to do something about it. Right? It's not a static item. You don't just wake up one day and there they are. I mean, it's a living, breathing, changing measure. And it's done by society.
If I could add to that, I feel like I agree with you. Ethics, though, used to be a little more standard. We all sort of agreed. And in my rule, you're saying, can you bring it back to your constituents? The rule in DC, I felt always was, if you don't want to see it above the fold on the front page of the Washington Post, then don't do it. Well, there is no above the fold anymore. There's no Washington Post anymore. So what is the rule now? And I feel like that's a little bit what we're saying. That your ethics is different from my ethics. In this new world, this sort of post-institutional world, everyone has to have their own ethics, and there's no one rule.
So your ethics is different from my ethics. Your facts are different from my facts. Let me go to someone else now. Let me see if I can get a different answer. Congresswoman Walters. So you came up in Congress at a time where there was a divide in your state, California.
There
right?
still is.
There still, true. There still is. But you came up at a time when both a party and the state were pulling in different directions, really different directions. What was the ethical situation like then for you? And how did you navigate? My ethics are different from your ethics.
So I think at the end of the day, you have to live with yourself. And you make a decision. Are you okay with that decision? Because when you're alone by yourself and whatever decision you made, when it comes to ethics, are you okay with that? And some people are okay, pushing the outside of the envelope and going a little bit too far. But then I think there are consequences for that. We're seeing that today on the cover of The Hill right now. And when I was a member of Congress, I think the way I handled it, because my district, coming from California, not a lot of Republicans, I wasn't a red district. So it's not like I could make decisions and go along with the party and everything would be fine. I had to be held accountable because my district was more purple. And when I made a decision, I had to answer to my constituents, and I had to be held accountable, or I wasn't going to be reelected. And I also, when I made a decision, I had to be kind of persuasive in a lot of ways to convince people that maybe this is why I see something the way I see. But I also felt like I had to really respect other people's opinion. And if I didn't agree with what their opinion was, I felt it important for me to be transparent. Because if I was transparent, then they would understand where I come from. And I also believe that it's the way we treat one another. Because if you're an unethical person, you basically don't care about the other human being and you're all about yourself. And so I personally tried to be ethical. That's why both Mike and I were on ethics, because I guess people thought, and by the way, that was not an easy job. Ethics was a very difficult job because you basically took on your own colleagues, and you had to take all the emotion out. You had to take out any political stuff, and you had to look at the individual, and you had to say, were your actions ethical or not ethical? And if they were not ethical, you had to be punished for that behavior. And we did not have a lot of friends when of those people who came before us, their cases in ethics. It was a very difficult position to be in. You oftentimes weren't liked, and you had to be okay with that.
I understand. You had to be okay with not being liked. And at the time, there were consequences. So let's fast forward to the moment we're in now, right? Where there are consequences for some, for example, Swalwell. but maybe they're not consequences for all. So, if you think about if you think about the current administration, comments like, you can grab women by the whatever P word, no consequence, resulted, as a matter of fact, sensationalizing some of these scandals, as you would call it, Brody, wields influence, right? And so is America telling us that ethics no longer matters? Or are we the one, are we misreading the moment? Are we weighing a lot on this time of being good and holding to certain virtues and standards in an era where TikTok is giving 1 million applauses to people making certain comments?
Well, I mean, Donald Trump has changed so much of Washington in his short time here, and ethics is one, and journalism is another. And there's a sort of a rule in journalism that goes back to Watergate that when you're looking for scandal to be a story, it has to be something hidden and someone's trying to not put out there, that you have to go as a reporter and dig it out and put it out there on the front page so that everyone reads about this scandal. The way Trump has done things is he just puts his own scandal out there publicly. And then you go to your editor and say, hey, I've got this great scandal. And they say, well, didn't Trump already say that? And it's not a story. And he sort of co-opted the scandal reporting business by just putting it on Truth Social. And then somehow it's not a scandal. And I think Swalwell sort of points to that also, where, maybe it's a little bit of a different example, but people knew about Swalwell, people knew about some of these other scandals. It just takes a long time for some of these to come out because just the way the journalism business has changed, I think.
I think social media has changed everything because there are these scandals that happened way back in the day. Humans are humans. They don't change. We have a lot of flaws, but the communication has changed. And to your point about the president putting out the scandal on social media, how many millions of people is he already getting out ahead of something? Because everybody is looking at their phones or they're looking at their social media. So the communication has changed. So these scandals have always been there, but now they're being highlighted and more people are seeing them just because we communicate much easier today through technology.
I agree with everything you said, but I also think that ethics does change. One of my predecessors in Congress was elected to Congress while he was serving in jail. James Michael Curley. He's actually got elected to office twice, serving in jail. Not once to Congress and once as mayor of Boston. If not too long ago, in my lifetime, nobody could have imagined a president who had been divorced because that was considered an ethical lapse. Today, it's almost a qualification for office. So things change. And again, the older you get, the less likely you are to embrace change. So a lot of us stick to the ethics that we grew up with. And we look at the world and say, oh my God, the world's falling apart. Well, they were probably saying that when I was 25 years old too. I'm sure they were. And they'll be saying it when they're my age for the next generation. It's just part of life. At the same time, I think that we have to sit there and try to figure out what the imposed ethics, the enforced ethics are at any given moment. And that is a combination of the older people like myself who have an ethics of maybe 50 years ago, I don't know what it is, versus the younger people who have no idea what life. You would not vote for president because they were divorced? I never thought about that, but I will tell you that when I started in politics, people told me that. When I started in politics, people told me nobody will vote for a man with facial hair. And probably was true. I don't remember up until recently, last president with facial hair, I don't know, Rutherford V. Hayes. I don't know. So things do change. And you can lament them all day long, say, oh my goodness, the world is changing, this is terrible. It depends. That's a personal life. Like it or not, things change, and we have to roll with those changes. And I think the Me Too movement was the most recent big change when it comes to ethics, not just in politics. I think it's true in private life. And we talk about politics, but it's not like this doesn't happen. All these things don't happen in private enterprise. They do. They usually happen more quietly.
Changes in ethics rules also tend to follow scandal. Again, starting with Watergate, Jack Abramoff, Paul Manafort changed the foreign lobbying rules. The question is, because Trump is putting out all his own scandal himself, does this become a scandal that leads to reform? Are we watching another Watergate? As in, will the American people revolt to what's going on right now? Will they elect people like after Watergate to reform Washington? Will there be a post-Watergate type reform in D.C. where we have members of Congress who take power from the presidency and bring it back to Congress? We'll see.
This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information.
I can say this for the private sector. So for the member organizations that we represent, and 60% of them are corporations, each and every single organization has a code of conduct. Each and every single organization has a standard of excellence. And should you find yourself on the other side of the code of conduct or the standard of excellence, the consequence is clear. It could include termination, right? And it's tangible, which means it could include loss of income, certainly loss of employment. But that's on the private sector side, right? Talk to us about what these consequences should look like today for those who are in the public sector, given that ethics has changed.
I actually believe in the power of retribution. I also believe in the power of forgiveness. Look, people need to be held to account for things they do wrong, either ethically or legally. But I also think that people can learn from their mistakes. And I've known a lot of people who have committed crimes in their past life that are now good, solid citizens. And I think that should be true everywhere. And I actually think it is true. People fall. People get held to account. I think it's a reasonably forgiving society over time if you're truly repentant about what it is you've done and understand and accept the fact that, okay, I made a mistake, I screwed up. I guess there's a line at some point. I don't know where that line is, but I kind of hope that people can be forgiven for their mistakes.
Yeah, and I think, listen, I'm Catholic, I'm a pretty religious person, and I think we're given a lot of chances in life. And I think to Mike's point, if you learn from your mistakes and you try to do better, that's okay. Like I said, we're human. But if you don't learn from those mistakes and you continue to go down that path, at some point it's going to catch up with you. And I like to say at some point, the man upstairs is going to teach you his lesson that you should have learned. And, so I think you just try, when you make the mistake, you try to turn around and you try to be a better person and learn from it. And if you don't, then the consequences are going to be greater.
Another thing that's worth mentioning is that at least the congressional ethics rules and a lot of the ethics rules for the executive branch are focused on disclosure. And so ultimately the man upstairs is in charge. But under our ethics rules, it's the American people who are in charge. The ethics rules say, as you guys can back me up here, it's all about disclosing things, disclosing your stock ownerships, disclosing your relationships, disclosing your outside income, disclosing things so the American people so journalists can write about it, but really so the voters can decide. So in a way, so much stuff that Trump is putting out there, it's ultimately going to be the voters who decide. And so far they're saying they're fine with this, which is kind of crazy, but.
Well, they're saying they're fine with it with him.
Correct.
I'm not so sure. I don't know what they did say. If I did the same thing, whether they would say it was fine. I think that question is yet to be answered. Yeah.
So let's talk about you as individuals, right? Because we've talked about the line. Talk to us about a time where you came up on that line, right? At what point did you say to yourself, if I'm compromising versus I'm being complicit?
Is this on the record? Can I take some edits on this one?
On the record for me, I never did. The closest I ever came, I had recently been elected alderman in my ward, a city council in my ward. I was probably 26 years old, give or take. And a friend, constituent, needed a handicap sign in front of his house because he was an older man and he wasn't quite invalided, but he was close. We got a handicap parking spot. And he came up to City Hall. You remember Angelo? And she slipped me $50. I said, "What's this for, Angelo?" He said, "Well, you got me that parking spot." I said, No. Thank you. Appreciate the thought. I didn't do it for this. So that's the closest I ever came. And Angelo Semino didn't mean it that way. He meant it, I don't know if he thought that's the way business was done or whatever, but yeah, he was a nice guy. Just, so, I mean, for me, that's the closest I ever came. Other than that, I will tell you once, when the city that I started out in, Somerville, Mass, at the time was a relatively corrupt place. And pretty much all our mayors and city councilors went to jail for always stupid things. But later on in life, I met by the time he was a federal judge, after I left Congress, we were having lunch together, and he happened to have been the U.S. attorney, district attorney, a U.S. assistant district attorney, who was prosecuting a lot of people I actually served with in the city at the time. He called one of his interns over and said, "I want you to meet, Mike Capuano." He said, "When I was getting started, we put everybody that he served with in jail." He said, "He's the only guy that everybody we talked to said, no, don't bother with Mike. He's not that way." It's like, well, why didn't you tell me this 40 years ago so I could have used it, as a political thing? Judge Wolf says Mike Capuano is the only honest man he ever met. It was too late, but so that was the closest I ever came, was Angelo Samito, and God rest his soul.
So thinking on that question, I remember in 2017 when we did the tax reform package, and coming from California, it was a very difficult decision for me to support it because some of my constituents were going to be hurt because California is a very high tax state. And the way you could, when you did your taxes, you could deduct your state income tax from your federal tax. Well, we were going to change that under the new tax law. And I had several of my very, very wealthy donors call me and ask me not to support the tax reform package because it was going to hurt them badly. And I felt that it was the right thing to do to support it because overall it was going to benefit more of my constituents than it was going to benefit the very, very wealthy. And that wasn't an easy conversation to have with somebody who's a big donor to you. But that was probably, I think, the only time, like Mike, I didn't have a lot of people I didn't come up with a lot of issues in that respect, but having to say no to some of your really big donors could have hurt me. Well, I ended up losing my race anyway in 2018, but you have to just stand up and you have to do what's right. And I just felt overall it was the right decision to support the package.
Let me answer this question a different way. In the media and coming out of Washington all year about it's the scandal. Everyone thinks that members of Congress are like Eric Swalwell on the cover of The Hill. In my 25 years looking for scandal in Washington on K Street and in Capitol Hill, I truly believe that 99% of members of Congress, 99% of lobbyists are good people doing the right thing. And the problem is in media, in journalism, we don't write about the planes that land. You write about the planes that crash. And that makes everyone think that everyone up here is trying to scam the public. And that's just not true. The young reporters I talk to, I say, if 1% of members of Congress are the bad apples, and that's 5.35 members of Congress, go find them. Eric Swalwell obviously is one of them. There's 4.35 left. Go find those folks. But most people are good people trying to do the right thing, sometimes taking a vote that costs you your election, and that's fine because you're happy with the decision you made.
And I just want, for the record, everybody to know I knew nothing about Eric Swalwell and the rumors, okay? I want to set the record straight on that one.
Well, and thank you for setting the record straight on that one. I want to go in, and poor Eric, like he's the poster child of our conversation today, but I want to go in and talk about, post Eric. So we've talked about Congress and we've talked about the administration. We've talked about you as individuals. I think the most important stakeholder for me is the room, the students in particular, the next generation. I've got 2 daughters, and I know almost all of us here are parents, and I don't think any parent delivers a child saying, "Oh, I hope you go to Capitol Hill and you get molested." I don't think that is something that we want, right? And I've been thinking a lot based on a lot of work I've done with public safety, homeland security. In that context, we teach people about preparedness, business continuity. Several folks here, show of hands, how many of you have had active shooter training, run, hide, fight. Exactly, right? So are we at a point in this new ethical era where we need to teach people how to navigate these abuses of power? And if so, what do we teach?
The answer is yes. I'm not sure. I know that members of Congress have to go through ethical training.
They do?
I think staff does. Pretty sure they do.
Do they remember the training?
Well, that's
Probably not.
There's always a question about empowerment of somebody, especially someone who is uncomfortable about a victimization. I'm the least qualified person to talk about how to empower somebody to stand up, and it's always amazing to me. I know that there are ways to do it. I also fully understand, I think I understand how difficult it is to do. I don't know how much more you can do. I mean, I guess maybe never enough, but I will tell you that half those trainings, again, I have to go back to what he said, 99% of the people you're talking to, you don't have to hear them. I mean, they have to hear them. That's not the problem. And it's always the case. Well, actually, I found this to be true about even voting. When I tell people to vote, I'm talking to the people who vote. I want to go grab the 80% of the people who don't vote, shake them by the collars. It's, you know, but they're never in the room when I'm making that conversation. And it's the same thing here. It's who are those 1% or 2%? If you tell me who they are, it's easy. And the victims, the same way. I don't know how to do it. If we can do better, we should. And I think people who know more than I might have ideas on it.
I think a lot of it today is in going back to the Me Too movement. Oftentimes it's the women who are being undermined. And I would say that having other women speak out that something has happened to them gives that younger generation the more confidence that they can speak out also, and they're not alone. So I think as the younger generation moves forward, it's not as taboo, if you will, and they don't have to be as fearful of consequences. I mean, that's why you have the whistleblower, right? You now have whistleblower protection. Issues like this help people come forward and not have repercussions for it.
And talking about whistleblower, I just want to go deeper on my question. I think about, for example, this 1%, right? So if you look at the Catholic Church as an example, and I'm a Catholic, the priests who were molesting children were the 1%. But we got to a point in the Catholic Church where we said, you know what? Time has come for us to train the children on what is safe touch and what is unsafe touch. And I'm asking the question, has the time come for us to lean on institutions like GW to say, as you're bringing people out into the real world, should we start to train them like we do run, hide, fight on navigating these situations?
I mean, as a longtime mainstream media person, I'm not a huge fan of social media and what it's done to the media and to our culture and society. But I think this is an area where it's been helpful, where, you know, when I was a younger reporter, there was a big scandal at the New York Times. I forget the name of the reporter who was sort of just making up stories, writing on front page stories in the New York Times that he just made up. And the people he wrote about had no recourse. They thought, oh, that's big media. They wrote a story of me. It's not true. And they just moved on. Well, today you put out a tweet or you put something on your own blog or put something on Instagram saying the story's not true and there's an immediate consequence. We're looking at this Eric Swalwell story and saying, you know, there's this story that's as old as time. Wealthy, successful, powerful white man takes advantage of his power with women. Well, maybe this is a story that 10, 20 years ago, he's still getting away with it. But because of the modern era where women have the ability to get their stories out so quickly, you said through an influencer, maybe that's making things better. Maybe it's giving the American people, regular folks who feel disenfranchised, more of a tool to combat the powerful.
I would also, and I don't know enough. I mean, I obviously know the headlines of the Swalwell and Gonzalez problems. But for the sake of this question, did the women involved, did any of them try to participate or try to take part of any of the opportunities they have to make those complaints? So far, I'm not saying that they didn't. I don't know. There are two questions here. One of the things was the bad actions by the bad actor themselves. Another question is, was the process that is available, was it used and is it sufficient? And that's two separate questions as far as I'm concerned. Bad actors are bad actors, but there should be a process by which people can feel comfortable using. And if they don't use it, then the question is, why not? If they did use it, did it work? And I don't know the answer to this particular one. I know that in the past, honestly, when it comes to ethics, the best thing I ever did here was, well, not how I drafted the Office of Congressional Ethics, which was the first time in history that the House has somebody outside of the House making judgment. Because as Mimi said, it's awfully hard to pass judgment on people you see every single day. I mean, you think we're all angels. We're not. We're not above it. We're just human beings like everybody else. It's hard to look somebody in the eye and say, we're going to hold you to it. That's hard to do. You had an outside agency to do it. It's a little bit easier. And it was all about transparency. 100% right. That's really what it was really all about. Make sure that things couldn't get swept under the rug. There are processes in place, I know they are, for staff to make complaints about members or hire staff. Were they used? And if so, did they work? And if they were used and didn't work, there's a lot of questions there that I think we haven't got to those questions yet in this particular scandal. And I actually hope they do, because if they didn't use the processes, I have to ask, well, why not?
But
How
by
do
the
we make
way,
it easy?
sometimes people will make a complaint for political purposes.
Yes.
That is very real too. And then you have to go through and you have to look at the facts to see if this was done politically or if this was true.
And in this
True.
particular situation, that was the insinuation at the onset. So in December, right, just so the record can show, there was someone who surfaced this situation on social media, on Twitter, and the perception was that it was for political purposes, and everyone knows the rest of the story. That said, for the record, I just want to note that I do find you three to be outstanding individuals, and I know that it is not easy to have this conversation, so thank you.
Thank you.
It is easy to have it because for me, look, I'm no angel. I've lived as close to the edge as I felt comfortable getting. I don't mind being held to account for anything I did. If you don't like what I did, say so. And either I say, I'm sorry, I say the heck with you, I'm going to do it again. I hate being held accountable for stuff I didn't know was wrong. And I hate being held accountable because you crossed the line and somehow, because I served with you, I got elected the year that Bill Clinton was impeached. And I will tell you that, I had a lot of young male friends, and a lot of them would, hey, you're going to Congress. We know what that means. First of all, you don't know me. Second of all, more importantly, you don't know my wife. But it was a bunch of guy locker room nonsense, but it was also uncomfortable that people would think that just because I get elected to Congress, now all of a sudden I'm going to become these things. And for me, hold me accountable for whatever I've done. Fine. That's what elections are all about. Don't hold me accountable for something I didn't do, and don't hold me accountable for something you did. And if you cross the line, I'll be happy to say, look, sorry. Actually, Eric Swalwell is a friend. He's not my first friend to get in trouble. And on the presumption that all these things are true, he should be held accountable. I hope I can find a place in my heart to say, okay, it's over. I hope he can find a place in his heart to, if, again, I'm going to let the process run. But he's not my first friend to get in trouble, not just in politics, but in life. And I've had many of them that, most of them, to be perfectly honest, at some point in their life, they finally say, well, okay, fine. And again, who am I to hold a grudge for the rest of my life? I'm just not that person. So this is not uncomfortable for me.
Oh, I can tell. Good for you. Well, one last question, because I know we're past time. Briefly, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is this room and the young people across the country. I mean, our society, our government is sort of a living, breathing, evolving, changing process. I never thought until this conversation about how our ethics evolves. So you guys are in charge of figuring out what our ethics are of our country and our society. And there's something scary about that, but there's something exciting about it. And you should embrace it. I mean, we are not the future. You guys are. And so what is our country going to look like? You decide.
I would echo that. I'm very hopeful, and the fact that we are having this conversation, this is the first time I've been invited to sit on a panel to talk about ethics. I think that that's a really great step, and I'm glad the issue is being brought to the forefront, and hopefully conversations like this will continue.
I don't think you can run for office unless you're an eternal optimist. You have to believe tomorrow can be better than today. You have to. And I do. I have no idea how. I have no idea how the world's going to navigate AI or all the other problems that we have. No clue. It's going to be a struggle. There's going to be mistakes. I mean, the general public makes mistakes all the time. But I also think we rectify them. So my hope is in general, not specific about ethics. It's just in general, I think that people want a decent society that they can be proud of. If any of you have traveled out of the country lately and talked to anybody from outside of this country, I think you'll realize that right now, there are a lot of Americans I know that are traveling that are claiming to be Canadians. So my hope is general, and ethics is part of it. It's not the only part, though. I want a better society. I think the average person wants one, and we'll make mistakes along the way. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And if there's any other way, well, then somebody else will be on this panel, speaking a different language, I guess. I don't know. So I don't have one about ethics specifically. It's just life.
Well, on that topic of life, what gives me hope is that for America at our 250 mark, we are here and we continue to endure. And as someone who has lived in several countries, I would say America is beautiful. We are uniquely democratic. We are so young in our journey. And I'm hopeful because of conversations like this and because of people in this room that we can actually openly and transparently have a conversation about ethics without fear, right? We know that we can walk outside without wearing bulletproof vests, right? And we can talk about these things. And so that gives me hope, as well as all of you. And so on that hopeful note, I just want to say thank you all. Thank you to our panelists for their time. Let's give them a round of applause.
Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver. We help clients transform complexity into clarity with people-centered strategies. Whether you're looking to elevate the influence of your brand or of your leaders, check out socialdriver.com to learn more. For show notes or to nominate a guest, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn.